Today I'm going to try and compare Diablo 3 and Diablo 2, two games that have been compared extensively, but it always seems to be in favor of Diablo 2. So today I'm going to try to be as objective as possible when comparing these two games that are very similar in some ways, but very different in many ways. So first up, I'm going to try and compare the tone. I'm not going to actually compare graphics because there's an obvious difference, between the release dates of these two games. Obviously, Diablo 3 came out roughly 10 years later, so there's no point in comparing the graphics. Obviously, Diablo 3 wins there. But when it comes to the tone of the game, I think it's important to remember that Diablo 3 is a much more light-hearted game. And it almost seems to be more of a Warcraft game with the story of Diablo. I say this because it resembles with its childishness and its tone much more the World of Warcraft style of game, while Diablo 2 is one of the more darker games when it comes to the ARPG genre, and even more darker than something like Grim Dawn or even than its predecessor Diablo 1. So Diablo 2 is a very, I wouldn't call it exactly a horror game, but it has a much more darker tone when it comes to the hellish depictions of the scenery, whereas in Diablo 3 the closest you get to like bloody depictions is just weird demons. You don't actually get like disembodied bodies or really just disgusting scenery that you see in Diablo 2. Next up is the story, which is very similar. In Diablo 2, you do see the story of the Traveler from Diablo 1, and all the things that you see is just to set up the story that you are going to play out and the story that you will create as a player. They don't actually give you set pieces that you have to follow, while in Diablo 3 it's very linear, it's very much streamlined, you know how stuff's gonna go, and they give you exactly the story that you have to follow with very little wiggle room. The most wiggle room you have is just the introduction scenery of each of the characters. And I think the gameplay when it comes to streamlining and the depth of the gameplay is very similar to this as well. When it comes to Diablo 3, everything is streamlined, you don't actually get to pick your points, your skills, anything like that. You can obviously change your build at any point in the game. Depending on your gear, you get a build that's better or worse. Now with the additions, with the newest patches, you can also change your equipment at any time. You don't actually have to individually every time pick the gear that you want to slot in. You just go to the armory, select which build you want, and select it, and you just go from there. It saves a lot of time, and even when it comes to leveling, you don't actually pick which point you want and which skill. It just happens on its own. When it comes to Diablo 2, it's very much more classic, when you actually don't have much ability to change your build at any point you want. And it's much more hardcore, and if you mess up, you mess up, and you potentially have to start a new character or just live with the mistakes that you made. This makes Diablo 3 a much more entry-level action RPG when it comes to the gameplay, while Diablo 2 is a much more hardcore and high-level to mid-level action RPG game, while obviously Diablo 3 is an entry-level action RPG, more suited for newer players. And this also comes to the end game, whereas Diablo 3 is much more suited to the end game, where you have obviously the adventure mode, you have the rifts, you have everything like that, which lets you continuously play every season for almost an infinite amount of hours. Just you can sink as much time as you can into the game and still have fun. Diablo 2 wasn't obviously designed in this way, and apart from the single player, you don't actually have much to do. You can obviously play to your heart's content the single player missions and stuff like that, but it's not exactly randomly generated as it is in Diablo 3, so it's gonna get boring after a while and it's gonna lose its charm. That being said, Diablo 3 doesn't have any mods, and mods to me are a very big and important role when it comes to single-player gaming, because modifications for games provide a potentially infinite amount of content, whereas Diablo 3 has a very limited amount of content, potentially unlimited depending how you see the adventure mode and the end game. But when it comes to Diablo 2, there's a lot of mods out there that let you customize your game as much as you want, with whichever mods you want. And I think that's sorely missing from Diablo 3. Obviously, we will never get it in Diablo 3. But with Diablo 2, if you already know what you want, and you know what kind of a character you want to build, and you don't mind it being a bit harder because you already have sort of experience in building your class and your character, then I think Diablo 2 is a much better game. If you are looking to get into the ARPG genre and you don't actually know what kind of character you want to build, and you don't actually know how the points work, and you don't know how the build system works and stuff like that, then Diablo 3 is a much better game for you, because it's very heavily streamlined and it's an entry-level ARPG. So if you're new to ARPGs, then I think Diablo 3 provides a much better new player experience compared to Diablo 2, whereas Diablo 2 is much better for the quote-unquote veterans of the series. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and a comment. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time.